Jen will be presenting on sustaining the advocate, the well-being, and building resistance in times of social justice. Jen LaCarriere, her work emphasizes the importance of caring for ourselves as we care for others, particularly for those who advocate for equity and justice in our communities. She will share strategies to maintain well-being, build resistance, and stay strong in the face of ongoing challenges. Please join me in welcoming Jen LaCarriere.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I'm just going to share my screen now. I just want to say thank you to everybody who presented before. It was awesome. A lot of the information just resonated with me. So thank you so much to our previous presenters. And I'm just going to share my screen and hopefully this all goes well without any glitches. And you could just give me a thumbs up if you're able to see my screen and everything is going well. Awesome. All right. So as Claire stated, my name is Jen LaCarriere. I'm a licensed master social worker, and I also hold a law degree from Southern University here. I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York, and I've been in Louisiana for the past 8 years, and law school brought me here. So initially, in terms of being an advocate is what brought me here to Louisiana in terms of making a change. And I wanted to go back to New York, but here I am about 9 years later, still in Louisiana. And there is a great need in Louisiana. And I saw that need. And so here I am, just fighting the good fight every single day as a social worker and as an advocate. Um, so today, if you just want to drop your name in a chat, and I just want to make it as interactive as possible for the time that we are here. I want to know who you are, in the chat, not necessarily what you do. If you want to drop that, if you're a social worker, if you're a nurse, if you're an allied professional, you can. But I just want to know outside of the work that you do, who are you? Outside of that work, and what do you plan to gain from this time that we are together? Okay. All right. So some of our learning, I'm not going to go through all of the learning objectives. I am going to provide the slides so that you all could know, later on. But for me, one of the most important things is examining the relationship between social justice work and well-being by identifying common stressors, risk of burnout, and the emotional labor inherent in advocacy and activism. So from all of our previous presenters that came in, we heard, burnout, the emotional labor, the labor of love that we just pour, into our work, into our communities in terms of helping others. And in terms of helping others, how do we sustain ourselves in the work that we do? Um, as I go through the previous slide, I just want you all, if you have your devices out, to get ready for the QR code that I am going to have up. And then I'm also going to put in the chat the link as well for you all to go in, and I'll kind of go through that slide with you as well. So here's our QR code, and I'll just give you a moment, just to scan that. And then also in the chat, you'll have the code where you can kind of click and, go through that chat option as well. So when looking at, this year's theme, it talks about Louisiana, the annual virtual Culture of Health Summit. And when I think about culture in terms of what does culture mean to you? And one of the other presenters, I think Tess, spoke about, the Haitian culture and resilience when she came and she did her presentation. And that was really impactful for me as someone who is Haitian American and culture. And when we talk about that, and when I think about, Louisiana culture, I think about, American culture, that resonates a lot. And when I think about all of these different things that kind of shape our identity within culture, nursing culture, social work. What does that mean to you? So I'll just take a few moments and just, let everybody kind of, chime in terms of what does that mean to them. All right. Identity means knowing who the person is in their beliefs, expressions of self as influenced by your surroundings. Awesome. And we just have a few more trickling in, and then I'm gonna close that. And it's taken some time to translate, yeah, but heritage, custom beliefs, your way of life. Um, and I just want to, Louisiana culture is one in itself. I'm going to say that and add that it was a big shift for me moving from, Brooklyn, New York, coming to Louisiana. But I must say, it's something because I'm here 8, 9 years later and still, in the Louisiana culture. And I just love it. And it is everything to me. And I don't see myself moving back to New York because I'm just so in love, with the culture here. All right, so I'm gonna move on. All right. Oh, I didn't want to do that one. Okay. All right, so my next slide in terms of advocacy and moving towards advocacy, and I think that's a big part, of course, in this presentation, but in your work, even as frontline workers, you're wondering what can you do in terms of advocacy. And I always tell my students, who are in the social work program, and we have a function of, health and mental health that they're going to, and they're going to be going into the forensic side, is why is advocacy important? So in social work, we have the 3 levels that you can work with a social worker. It's the micro level where you're individual, meso, community practice, and then you're going to do the macro level, which is more so, working with policies, institutions. But I always tell the students that are coming in that you should, no matter if you're working on the micro level with the client, you should be embodying every single one of those levels in terms of micro, macro, and meso practice. You should be advocating for your client. So if a client comes in and tells you that they are experiencing, some form of they're unhoused, and there isn't any shelters in your community to assist that person, do you stop there as a social worker? And I want to give an example. When I first came to Louisiana in 2016, and I came with the great flood of Louisiana right in July when, boom, here it was. And I started working, and some of you might be familiar if you are in Baton Rouge, this FQHC. I started working at Care South Medical and Dental here in Louisiana, right here in Florida Boulevard. And one of the families came and she said that she is sleeping in her car. And I mind you, I was brand new to Louisiana, didn't know any better, but still a social worker, but wasn't familiar with the things of Louisiana yet. And it was her and her 16-year-old son at the time. And she said, I don't have a place to sleep. I am just living out of my car right now at this present time. And I put my foot in my mouth and I said, "Oh, we are going to get you housing. We're going to get you into a shelter. Just give me one moment." And I was still operating on the framework that I was in New York, where they had, services. And I told her, "Yeah, we're going to get you and your son shelter. Absolutely." And I remember going to my supervisor and I said, "Hey, do we have a listing to the centralized housing system here so that we can get shelter?" And she looked at me and she said, "What is that?" And I said, "Well, you all don't have a shelter system where if a family is experiencing homelessness, they can kind of go and that they can get into some housing." And she said, "No." And I remember feeling so bad, having to go back to that family to let them know that, unfortunately, there isn't anything that I'm able to give you at that moment. I can give you numbers to shelters you can call. Um, Long story short, in her calling, they wanted to separate the child, which was 16 at the time, put them in a men's shelter and put mom in a shelter because they don't have family shelters here in Louisiana. So I say that all to say is it is 8, 9 years later, and we are still in the same situation from when I came in 2016. Um, Still fighting to get some kind of comprehensive shelter in place for families, still trying to work with, the lobby groups that we work with out here, the different coalition groups that we work out here, to do something that's sustainable, for families within Louisiana. And why that's important to me is somebody said that before. I think, Dr. Rooney said that it is our ethical obligation, whether we are nurses, whether we are social workers, or whatever group that we are in, to advocate for our clients in policy, in practice, because there is a need that is unfulfilled. It is our ethical obligation not only to provide that family with resources, but on the advocacy level, on the legislative level, within the state that we're in the community that we're in, how can we help, um, our population? All right. So I am going to move on to this next slide in terms of, hold on one second. Oop, bear with me, y'all. Okay. All right. So here I am at my screen, and I'm just going to scroll here. And in one word, what is your emotional state or posture in your advocacy work right now? Are you doing advocacy work? How do you feel about advocacy work? Is it draining? Is it something that you find, energized? Do you love to do it? Do you do it now? Somebody said frustrated. All right. Hard but rewarding. All right. Stressful. There's some things that are popping in. Hard, overwhelming. Yeah, it's a lot. It is a lot. Um, Going in during the legislative session, and we have our groups that we work with, or the social work groups. It is a lot. Resilient, stress, challenging. Thank you, y'all. All right. So I'm gonna stop the responses from coming in, but um it's not computing between the responses that I have on my screen and everything that's coming in. But yeah, that was some of the responses, stressed. Okay. All right. Invigorating. Awesome. Thank you, y'all. All right. So I'm going to continue on. All right. So, in all of that work, in terms of what everybody said, challenging, stressful, hard but rewarding, energized, stressed, overwhelming, I want you to say this out loud, to yourself while you're out here. And then I will say it with you all. I know that I'm not able to hear you, but you're able to hear me. So we can just go together. In our professions, advocacy is sacred work, but it's also soul work. We're expected to carry the pain of systems that fail people, yet we're rarely given space to rest, recover, or resist depletion. Sustaining ourselves isn't weakness, it's wisdom. All right. And when you are, even while you're sitting here, by yourselves, and you have to repeat that again so that you understand that we are dealing with systems that are hard, whether it's in our workplaces, the federal government with everything going down right now, our local government, you have to give yourself the space to rest, recover, and resist depletion. I'm going to give you another, story. I have all my life, because I'm going back to culture. I'm raised in a Haitian culture that says you have to work hard. You have to be always on the go. We know Brooklyn culture is like a hustle culture That's why I also like the slow pace of Louisiana because it's not as fast as New York. And we don't have time to rest, recover. So all my life, I've always worked two jobs because I've seen in my culture, you have to work hard. You have to work hard. And when you're an immigrant, you have to work twice as hard. And Dr. Rooney talked about intersectionality. When you're a female, you have to work twice as hard. When you're a Black female, you have to work twice as hard. So that is the culture that I was brought up in. So for the very first time this year, and I'm not ashamed to say my age, out of my 41 years of life, I've been working since I was 14 years old in summer youth employment programs. And for the first time in my life this summer, I didn't work. And it felt so foreign to me to be able to say that I am not going to work. I'm going to take this summer off and I'm going to say no so that I can recover because I felt depleted. I didn't answer any emails. And I just said, I'm going to allow myself the time to rest. And I know that that may not be an option, for everyone. But in academia, typically you work, throughout the summers. And when it was offered to me, I said, no, I'm going to use this time to do absolutely nothing. So, and it felt great. And in some ways, I still feel like I'm on rest mode, and I'm on summer mode, but I'm slowly getting back there right now. But it felt great. And so, shifting gears, advocacy in terms of advocating, we always advocate for our clients. But when do we advocate for ourselves? And when you advocate for yourself, what does that look like in terms of you advocating for yourselves? So, advocacy protects clients and communities. So, I know when we're advocating for our clients, for them to get the best care, marginalized communities have representation in health decisions that affect them. But we live in these communities too. And I always say one of my favorite things to say is if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And I always like to be on the table because I don't want to be on the menu. And I like to be active in my community. I want to know what's going on in my community. So I'm going to sit at the boards to find out because if you're not there, then decisions are going to be made around you. And that's going to be it. So we have to be the advocates for ourselves. So what does that look like in terms of, and I'm switching back and forth between clients and ourselves. A social worker, like I said, challenging housing discrimination that impacts a client's health outcomes. A nurse advocating for trauma-informed care policies in a hospital setting. A coalition, like this one, of professionals pushing for fair wages, adequate staffing, or equitable health policies. So I want to hone in on this last one, a coalition of professionals. Here we are, a group of professionals. Um, when is the last time that you advocated for fair wages? I know that sometimes, we get scared, I don't want to ask for more money. If I ask for this, then, I might be fired and then they'll give it to somebody, who wants to work a lower wage. But, that's just an example. But when is the last time that you really advocated for yourself the same way that you advocate for your patients and your clients that you serve? Um, advocacy, a culture of health in which, we're promoting culture of health, which is our theme this year, is health equity is prioritized. Systems collaborate to remove barriers to wellness. Communities are empowered to participate in health decision. All right. And that looks like, joining coalitions like this one. One that I am a part of is Together Baton Rouge. And like you are, if you're local to Baton Rouge, you might know them. Together Baton Rouge is a host of different coalitions that are coming together. NASW happens to be part of one of those organizations that is part of the coalition. They have faith-based organizations that are part of that coalition, and they have a whole bunch of other people. But it's coming together to kind of create this organizational change, this community change that we're looking for. And it is us coming together to amplify our voices in the communities that we live in to be able to help, yes, our clients, but to also to be able to help us as practitioners who are out in the field. So when we all come together as this culture coming together, we're able to go to the Capitol, we're able to speak with Landry, we're able to speak to those that are, if you are again in EBR, that now on the ballot, we're having the Thrive, that is on the budget here for November 15th. How do you come collectively to have your voices heard? Because this directly affects you too. It affects you too as the practitioner. All right. All right. Advocacy connects self systems and societies for both nurses and social workers. So it's a bridge between direct practice and systemic reform. It aligns personal values, like you said in the beginning, compassion, justice, integrity. It keeps professionals connected to purpose, but also exposes them to burnout and moral injury if systems, Dr. Tess, spoke about this burnout and moral injury if systems resist a change. So, in terms of, the challenges, that emotional state that you spoke about, if things are not looking good and we're going out and we're fighting every day, we're amplifying our voices, and nothing is changing. And that goes for organizations too, organizational culture, and not always on the local and the federal level, but inside of your workplaces. If those things are not changing, that results in burnout and moral injury as well. So, one thing that I said is we can't build a culture of health if the advocate themselves, us, are unwell, silenced, or burned out. And a lot of us are working in places where we can't voice anything in the workplace because we're afraid if we voice something again, it's unheard, or you have this target on your back because you can't say anything. High caseloads, if we're working in child welfare, those of us who are working in the hospital setting, um, or just hospice, it doesn't matter what care setting that you're in. These things still apply. So sustaining advocacy means protecting yourself, the advocate, so that you can continue to protect others. And I really like that the code of ethics, and I always go back to it, and I think it makes all of the difference, that who is your manager and who your supervisor. If you are a social worker and you are working in a place that your manager is not a social worker and you are, or you're a nurse and that person maybe has an MBA, what they see is the bottom line, the dollar, and we need you to do this. So it makes a difference in the workplace culture who your manager is and who is in that place with you. Because, like the doctor said in the fireside chat, it goes back to that mission and that vision, and that we all align, together. And then we're able to continue the work in terms of sustaining ourselves, building employee morale, building those things, because we all share in the same mission and the same vision. And it's not to knock, anybody who, is a social worker and that maybe they have like a person that's an MBA above them or anything, but I just feel like, we align when we all have that shared ethical principles, and we can go back, to these certain codes of ethics that we have. All right. All right. When advocacy fails or falters, all right, when professionals cannot sustain their advocacies, clients experience fragmented or inequitable care, and they just cannot perform at their best. And for you have to know at that point, you have to do some self inventory. I know I've had to do it. I have experienced burnout, and I know for myself that I can no longer work in direct practice, with people providing mental health care. I know that that's where I'm at. I'm not to say that I'm never probably going to do it, but I know that I was at a breaking point where I said, well, I need to pivot. And you have to know, when to pivot, when to advocate, for yourself again, and to say, you know what, this is just not sustainable. Because let's be for real, burnout, yes, it can be prevented, but then it leads to further complications. As other people said, it can lead to stress, it can lead to anxiety, it can lead to depression. So we have to know how to, be best advocates for ourselves. All right. Communities begin to lose trust in helping systems because at this point, you're burned out, you're not giving your best, and sometimes you just stop caring. Health disparities deepen, professionals experience moral distress, compassionate fatigue, and you are just not as empowered as you were. So you have to know to do that self inventory. What can I do? Do I need to shift? Do I need to pivot? Do you need to lean in on somebody? Do you need extra supervision, from your supervisors? Do you need time off? What do you need to do for yourself? How can you advocate for yourself? When was the last time that you advocated for yourself? So please remember that. I'm not gonna, go through all of these. You're gonna have the slides, surely at a later time, but these are some of the key things that we spoke about. And these are some of the key things that all of the presenters spoke about, throughout here in terms of burnout, what it is, what it isn't, moral distress, that moral injury, that we have, compassion fatigue, emotional overload. And I would be surprised if anybody said that any point in time that they haven't gone through that. I mean, it is going to happen at any point in time when you are, in the helping field, you're directly working with people that are experiencing any kind of emotion, you're going to experience that. But there are ways, to prevent it. Um, Self-care, we throw up that word out a lot, but it is important in terms of self-care. Self-care looks different for everyone. Self-care is free. It is. You do not have to spend any money for self-care to take care of yourself. Every day for myself, self-care means listening to NPR in the morning because I'm an NPR junkie. It's what brings me joy. I have a whole routine. Self-care looks at, organization, cleaning your house. Or maybe, if you have the means and cleaning is something that you don't like to do, having somebody come in once a week or once every 2 weeks to kind of clean your space, clean your environment, get you organized. Whatever it means for you, it can mean walking outside. I get up intentionally because I'm here alone and working at a computer all day. So it's getting up every hour on the hour and just taking a walk to clear my mind, listening to music. So, yes, self care is for free. All right. So, the myth of the inexhaustible caregiver. And, um, oh man, my Haitian culture, it taught me a lot in terms of, I remember, my mom always saying, you don't have time to be exhausted. You just have to keep on going. You have to keep on pushing, no matter what. And our culture, I mean, we really feed into that, sometimes that we have to keep on going and burning the candles at, both ends. And it treats overwork as virtue. We always have to be busy. And it's always at a time people kind of promote like this hustle culture. And you have to have multiple jobs or you have to be doing multiple things. And if you're not busy, you're lazy. If you're not doing something, you're lazy. But we have to take a moment. You have to relax. You have to give yourself a moment. You don't have to, as soon as you get up, be on the go. Take a moment, to relax. Um, I'm guilty of pressing the snooze button several times and just sitting there and just looking at the ceiling and just being thankful, right there in that moment. And being exhausted is not a badge of honor. I no longer wear that, anymore, in terms of if I you have to be always on the go to feel like you're fulfilled. Just take a moment. Like the last presenter say, like just take a moment to breathe, relax. Relax. Learn to relax. You don't always have to be on the go. True advocacy includes advocating for the advocate. So I think somebody in here had said, how does that look like in the workplace? What can you do in the workplace? Do they promote, you know, some places call them like chill rooms, or 15 minutes, break room, but outside of the break room where they have like lunch and food and things, like, just chill room. I am just maybe not feeling my best, right now. I just handled a difficult patient. Um, I just need to take a moment to go in there and just chill and relax, and then regroup and then come back. Um, and not just continue to push yourself. If you don't have that, maybe you're in a position in your job to implement that or to provide feedback at your job. Can we create a chill room, um, so that we can relax? If the system expects us to be tireless, it must also be accountable for providing us rest. Now, NASW Code of Ethics specifically stated that in their guidelines, and so did, ANA here as well, that self-care is paramount. It is a must. You must. So I mean, it's kind of crazy to think that, that they had to put that in there for you to be able to know that you have to do that. I am making it mandatory for you to, this is part of your ethics. This is part of your self-care. And this is really something that came after COVID, saying that you must take care of your own well-being. So it is in your ethics. So every year when we're hearing about, surely burnout, self-care, it's not this new phenomenon that just came out. It's nothing new, but it is something that has to be amplified, because you need to know that you need to take care of yourself first and foremost before you're able to take care of anybody else. And I think most of the time, because work becomes a lot of everybody's identity. That's why I asked you in the beginning, who are you? Who are you outside of work? Because sometimes the first thing that we answer, and I'm guilty of that too, is when somebody asks me, yeah, so tell me about yourself. I'm a social worker. Listen, before anything else, I am an individual outside of my work, outside of my profession, outside of anything else. And I need you all to remember that before anything else, before your professions, you have a whole different identity outside of that. So change your language. And when people ask me, well, tell me about yourself. Well, what you want to know? I'm this, a hardcore girl from Brooklyn. I talk loud. I talk with my hands. This is who I am. I'm Haitian. This is who I am outside of any professional setting, outside of anything else. Yes, social work makes up my identity. I am a social worker. I'm an advocate through and through, but I have all of these different things as well that make my identity. Okay. All right. So advocacy is not a one-way street. So I'm like really, hammering this in, and you've heard me say it. Advocacy is just as much for us as it is for the clients that we serve. And I think once we are enamored with it and it hammered in, and I say that all the time, to the students, this experience, when we're working with clients, it's an experience. The experience is just as much for them as it is for us, because our beliefs, everything comes into the work that we are doing. So when we think of advocacy, we often picture, fighting for others, our patients, our clients, in our communities. But please remember to fight, for yourself, in this work that we're doing. And, I'm not going towards, as you can see, I'm not, going everything for the slides. My slides so much are just for show and kind of points, but advocacy is not self sacrifice, it's self preservation through collective transformation. And advocacy is also working in community. All right. So, in this mission, it is working with people who are allies, with us in this profession. It is speaking up. So people who are you're able to come together with collectively in your organizations that have the same beliefs that you have, that want to call out structural racism and equity and inequity within our professions. Do so, come together. That's how some of these, I'm not saying for anybody to go protest or, do any of those things. That's not what I'm saying. But if you want to, go ahead. But if you're having, high caseloads, it's coming to the table, with your employers or whoever it is to say, how can we reduce the caseloads, that we are having? How can we demand safe workplace and equitable pay and fair workloads? We are advocating for sustainable justice because if we want to transform society, we must first transform the conditions of those doing the transformation. All right. So if you all are not familiar, I invite you to be familiar with some of these things for the social workers who are here. If you've ever been to Lobby Day, great. If you haven't been to Lobby Day in the past, I implore you to join in, on the Lobby Day, that specifically for social workers that they've had. Join in on the process. If you are a social worker, like I said, if you're not at the table, then you're on the menu. Things are happening around you, and you don't get to be a voice in the things that are happening around you. Telesupervision was one of those things that, were going on. If I'm a social worker and I want to get a supervisor because I want to obtain my clinical hours, you're limited sometimes to where you can get your supervisor. So it opens up a possibility for you to, if you're in Baton Rouge, to get a supervisor in Monroe. So these are some of the things that we lobby for, right? And for nurses, Louisiana Nurse Advocacy Day, which was in April 2025, of this year, did you participate? How can you get involved? Do you need some protections? What is it that you need? Or how is your workplace, involved in Lobby Day? While you're here, these are ways for you to get your voice out there, let your issues be known, and have a seat at the table because this directly affects you and your clients. So sustaining the advocate means dismantling the conditions of that cause burnout. So the policy changes, staffing ratios, fair pay. I don't know the pay. I didn't look at that in terms of, I know the pay for social workers in Louisiana is horrible. And I'm going to tell you that I don't work in Louisiana. Um, I work in Kansas, and some of the other work that I do is on the East Coast. And because of that, I don't work in Louisiana, but I'm very involved in Louisiana through coalitions with TBR, with the legislator and different things so that we can get pay in Louisiana because it is horrible. Now, for I know that nurses are higher in terms of social work pay, but that not that much higher. So how are you meeting, with your legislators throughout the state of Louisiana to find out how we can increase, pay rates? Medicaid rates are substantially low in the state of Louisiana. Um, how can you meet with those people? To discuss that. And then so this last well, okay, well, in this last one that I would like for you to do here is what drains your advocacy, and then we're going to be ending soon, is what drains your advocacy energy the most right now? And I have these questions for you at the bottom here. Okay. All right. And it's slow on my end, but the most responses that we received was systemic barriers, policy and bureaucracy leading by emotional fatigue or burnout. And it's not translating from my end for whatever reason, but yes. Um, so that came in at the top, was the systemic barriers. Yeah, yeah. So you're seeing it now. All right. And I just want to, kind of take some, time. Like I said, my slides are pretty much, all for show sometimes because I go in outside of the slides, but I just kind of want to give some time for questions that we have in our last 2 minutes that we have, in terms of any thoughts or any questions that you have on.
So thank you, Jen. We're going to encourage you, if you have questions, to please enter them into the Zoom Q&A feature, and we'll address as many as time will allow. So I do see. So first is, what can we do as a coalition really to help get the housing network established? What are the challenges to getting this done?
All right. So I would say, depending on, where you are. So I know that Together Baton Rouge, I spoke about them. So they are a coalition of different coalitions. You can Google them, and there are really strength in numbers that are going on when you come together. You can find out, the mayor's initiative as well, to see, what coalitions, because he has coalitions. If you are specifically in EBR, you can join in on those coalitions because we're a part of those coalitions as well. Louisiana Action Coalition, I know it's specifically for nurses, but it is just going out, networking, having your voices heard. So, just join in, on different things that are happening in your community, volunteering in your community, around housing issues, and just, taking it from there. And reaching out to your elected officials too. They love emails, they love phone calls, they love to go out to lunch with their constituents. You're the ones that voted them in. So if you're able to go in Landry's, committee people, and just email them and say, hey, I would love to meet with you in terms of what you're doing.
Yeah, that's great insight. I also think we can take away from this morning from Dr. Crowan is that we can get involved with the department and the state initiatives too to try to help with some of these as well.
Mhm.
So I'm not seeing any more questions. We do have sort of just a comment in the chat. It just says self-care policies should be part of human resource policies. Workers need to periodically step away from work for whatever reason, then they stay home for a break. There's an imbalance between work and home. People work 8 to 12 hours weekdays while personal responsibilities lag behind. So I'm not sure if you want to comment on any of that.
Yes. So that's why I said it is really important who your who your organizational leader is. For me, my organizational leader is a social worker, and that makes all of a difference because we align, we have the same mission, we have the same visions on many things. So I think it makes a big difference when you have somebody who is, a business major, like I said in the beginning, and their business is the bottom line, and we need to get these numbers, then they don't really care so much about what your code of ethic and what your ethics are going on, because it's all about the bottom line. Um, in actuality, it's all a business, but I think it makes a difference. And it's really just like I go back to advocating for yourself and letting them know, hey, in my code of ethics, it says this. So how can we incorporate this in the workplace?
Thank you for that. I just would like to reiterate too, when you talked about the Louisiana Action Coalition, it is not just nursing, it is open to all healthcare professions, and we're all striving for the same thing for optimal health for Louisiana.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your insightful and your passion. I can tell so much by your speaking that you're so passionate about this. So thank you for sharing that
Thank
expertise
you.
with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Jen, thank you so much for reminding us to, really take care of ourselves. It's not a selfish thing. It's essential that we do this. It's very important.
Mhm. Yes.
And the strategies for resilience and balance are invaluable as we continue to work in advancing equity and supporting the workforce. We definitely need to keep that in mind. And I
Mhm.
do like that comment about, what are we doing in our organizations to kind of help promote this, and having a policy around that would be very valuable.
Mhm.
So thank you so much.
Thank
Yeah,
you.